Dr. Catherine Hayes was never late. Not once in her 8 years at the Healthbridge Rehabilitation Center had she arrived after 9 a.m., missed an appointment without notice, or let a patient down. Colleagues, out of earshot, called her the machine, not with malice, but with that particular respect that always hides a pinch of envy. Her boss, Dr. Patricia Vance, once told her directly, closing the office door and lowering her voice as if sharing a state secret. "Hayes, you work as if the Joint Commission is observing you at every moment. Will you ever learn to exhale?" Catherine had only shrugged, not because she had nothing to say, but because there was no point in explaining. She didn't know how to relax. It wasn't a flaw. It was her design, like a device with no pause button. 38 years old, chestnut hair, which she had cut every 3 months, strictly by the same stylist, with no experiments. Fair, clear skin, not a gift of nature, but the result of discipline. Sleep, water, no cigarettes, no alcohol on weekdays. A face with almost no makeup mascara, a clear lip balm, and that was enough. She dressed unpretentiously but impeccably. Straight dark slacks, soft jackets in muted tones, comfortable flat shoes. The last part was a matter of principle. A rehabilitation specialist who is on her feet all day cannot afford sore feet. It would be disrespectful to the patients who came to her specifically to learn how to walk again without pain. Her home was orderly, not sterile or museum-like, but the living order of a person who knows the place for everything and doesn't waste time searching. That Tuesday morning began without deviation. Alarm, shower, breakfast, oatmeal, and half a grapefruit, the same as on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Catherine gathered her documents, zipped her bag, poured hot tea with mint into a thermos, and left the apartment. In the entryway, her car keys hung on a hook. On the small table lay the keys to her office and the safe. She had specifically placed them there the night before to avoid searching for them in the morning. Her daughter, Chloe, was asleep. 13 is an age when waking a person before 8 is physically possible but morally destructive. Catherine didn't wage war in the mornings. Chloe was a responsible, thoughtful girl, with that rare adolescent ability to hear not the words, but the intonation behind them. For the last 6 months, she had become noticeably quieter. At dinner, she often ate in silence, glancing from her mother to her father, like someone trying to understand the rules of a game they weren't invited to but are inevitably a part of. Catherine saw this and kept postponing the conversation. There was always a reason to put it off. Her husband, Michael, had left for work early. He worked for a large IT firm, dealing with corporate infrastructure and security, a title that sounded good and was hard for an outsider to verify. He would describe the details of his work willingly but vaguely. A meeting with a client, scheduled server maintenance, a trip to a site. Catherine had stopped trying to understand, not from indifference, but from fatigue, from the feeling that the details didn't add up to a complete picture. It was easier not to try. Now, that seemed strangely naive to her. In the parking lot by her building, she tossed her bag onto the back seat, started the engine, and pulled onto the road. At the second traffic light, with a familiar morning gesture, she reached for the inner pocket of her bag, the place where the keys to her office, one for the door lock, the second for the safe with patient records and official stamps, should have been on their detachable ring. The pocket was empty. Catherine slowed down, not abruptly, but carefully, as she did everything and pulled over to the shoulder. She opened her bag completely, sorting through the contents: wallet, phone, laptop in its sleeve, a folder with printouts, a pack of tissues. The keys were nowhere. They were still on the table in the entryway, right where she had put them last night, specifically so she wouldn't forget. Catherine stared at the road ahead for a few seconds, then made a U-turn. Without her office keys, she couldn't get in until the administrator, Nancy, arrived. Nancy never showed up before 9:30. The first patient was at 9:15. Sitting in the hallway for over an hour, and canceling the appointment was out of the question. It meant she had to go back. The neighborhood was quiet. Early May, the morning still cool, the air thick and damp after the night. Lilacs were blooming in a neighbor's yard, their heavy purple clusters releasing a dense, almost tangible fragrance. Starlings sat on the telephone wires. The courtyard was empty. Everyone had already left for the day, and those with nowhere to rush were not yet awake. Catherine entered her building, rode the elevator to the 4th floor, and took out her apartment key. This one she had. It was always with her. She inserted it into the lock and turned it quietly, carefully. Chloe was sleeping. No need to make noise. The door opened without a sound. The entryway was dark and silent. The keys were on the table, in the same spot she had left them. Catherine took them, clipped them to the ring, and was already reaching for the front door handle when a voice came from the bedroom, quiet, almost inaudible. A whisper, but in the absolute silence of the apartment, it passed through the closed door like a needle through fabric. I did everything. She'll never guess what we've planned. So, when she gets to work today, a pause, a rustle, as if the person had taken a step, shifted their position, cradling the phone between their shoulder and ear. Yes, exactly like that. It will all go exactly like that. Don't worry. Silence. Catherine stood in the entryway, her hand on the keys in the lock. She didn't move, not because she was scared and frozen, but because her brain switched into a mode she knew well from work. Total focus on incoming information, zero unnecessary movements, no reactions that would interfere with hearing. Behind the door was the bedroom. Michael, her husband, who was supposed to have left long ago. Michael, who was speaking quietly on the phone because he didn't want to be heard, and he was talking about her. This meant something was planned for her workday, tied to her schedule, calculated based on her absence from home. Michael Hayes, 40 years old, dark-haired, taller than average, with that particular way of speaking quietly and to the point, which always gave people an impression of reliability. Colleagues respected him, neighbors greeted him first, acquaintances described him as a good guy, solid, one of those you could count on. Catherine once thought the same. She had spent more than 13 years of their marriage building that belief. Now she was standing in the entryway of her own apartment, listening to her husband confirm to someone in a hushed voice that everything was ready, that she wouldn't guess, that the plan was based on her workday. The whispering behind the door ceased. The silence became absolute. Catherine lowered her hand, took a silent step back. Another one. She pulled the front door toward her, slowly, holding the latch with her hand so it wouldn't click. She stepped out onto the landing, closed the door with the same care she had used to open it, and leaned her back against the wall. There was no panic in her chest, only a coldness, a steady, deep, almost professional cold, the same cold a doctor feels in their hands when they see the test results and understand. The situation is serious. This was not the time for emotions. It was time for action. She took out her phone, opened the Notes app, and began to type methodically, without extra words. Tuesday morning, returned for office keys. Michael is home, though he supposedly left before me. Heard from the bedroom through a closed door. I did everything. She'll never guess what we've planned. So, when she gets to work today, it will all go exactly like that. Don't worry. Voice was quiet, tone final. Not a discussion, but a confirmation of a ready plan. She reread it, then added a line. Returning for keys was accidental, not foreseen in his calculations. He's confident I'm gone and won't be back until evening. She saved the note, put the phone in her pocket, walked down the stairs, and went out to the courtyard. The car door made a soft click, the engine a steady hum. She pulled out of the courtyard and only then allowed herself to think, running through the possibilities one by one. First, something related to her work. A conspiracy with someone from the clinic. Unlikely. Michael barely knew her colleagues, never showed interest in the details of her professional life, and didn't have enough information to do everything. Second, finances. Money, accounts, savings. This version fit better. The words, "she'll never guess," rhymed too well with transactions a person carries out during their partner's workday, while the victim is busy and not checking notifications. Third, an escape. She said the word to herself calmly and firmly, not as a catastrophe, but as a hypothesis requiring verification. An escape, possibly with money, possibly leaving her with debts, possibly with someone whose name she didn't yet know. Chloe, the girl who was now sleeping in her room, suspecting nothing. The girl who for the past few months had been silently observing what was happening between her parents and drawing her own conclusions, quietly, to herself, as only children in families where adults don't talk can do. Chloe must not be harmed. This wasn't a wish. It was a commitment, rigid, personal, and not subject to revision, no matter which of the three scenarios it was. Healthbridge Rehabilitation Center greeted her with its familiar scent: lavender, a faint hint of antiseptic, and a floral air freshener. White walls, a reception desk, a fish tank by the entrance. The pride and joy of Dr. Vance, who had spent 3 months convincing the clinic's owners that a live aquarium reduces patient anxiety by 20%. She seemed to have invented the figure herself, but she was convincing. The fish had been swimming for 2 years now. Catherine walked down the hall, unlocked her office, turned on the light, set down her bag, and opened her laptop. Her schedule: 6 patients. The first at 9:15 a.m., the last at 4:40 p.m. A normal day, exactly the kind Michael was counting on. 9 minutes until her first appointment, Catherine took out her phone, opened the note, and added a final line, waiting to see what exactly he did. "I will find out today, sooner than he thinks." She put the phone away, folded her hands on the desk, looked at her office door, and began to wait, calmly, methodically, as always, waiting for results when she already knew they wouldn't be in her favor, but that it was in her power to change the outcome. She didn't have to wait long. The first patient arrived at exactly 9:15. Gerard, 62. Rehabilitation after a hip replacement. A heavy, slow-moving but persistent man who entered the office each time with the look of someone ready for battle and left a little more confident on his feet. Catherine respected him for not complaining, for just doing the work. She valued such patients especially. She conducted the session flawlessly. Her voice was steady, her hands precise, her gaze focused. Not a single muscle in her face betrayed what was happening inside her. In 8 years of practice, she had learned to split herself in two. One part works here, with the patient, completely and without reserve. The other, somewhere deep inside, continues to think its own thoughts. It wasn't cynicism, it was survival. You don't last long in rehabilitation otherwise. Gerard left at 10:15, carefully placing his feet in the hallway. Catherine closed the door behind him, returned to her desk, and the first thing she did was pick up her phone. No notifications, not yet. She put the phone away and opened the next patient's chart. The second session. The third. Time passed measuredly, almost monotonously, as it always did on Tuesdays. The clinic smelled of coffee from the staff room. One of her colleagues had brewed a pot this morning. The aroma seeped into the hallway and lingered until lunch. Through her office window, she could see a piece of the courtyard, the parking lot, a few trees in their May greenery, a blue sky without a single cloud, a beautiful day outside, a normal day inside, exactly the kind Michael was counting on. The notification arrived at 11:47 a.m. Catherine was between patients. Her fourth had been delayed by 10 minutes, and the fifth hadn't arrived yet. She was sitting at her desk, finishing notes in a chart, when her phone vibrated on the edge of the desk, short and insistent. A notification from her banking app. She picked up the phone and read, "A transfer has been initiated for the amount of $48,000. To confirm the transaction, please enter the code from the SMS." Catherine stared at the screen for 3 seconds. Exactly 3. She counted to herself because, at that moment, it felt important to count something concrete. $48,000. That was almost all the savings from their joint account. Money they had been putting away for the last 4 years, officially for Chloe's education. For a down payment if their daughter wanted to live on her own. For emergencies. $48,000. Which Catherine had saved by putting aside $800 to $1,000 a month. Methodically, without fail, just as she did everything in her life. The SMS code hadn't arrived. That meant the transaction wasn't complete. It was in the initiation stage, which meant she had time. Catherine tapped the notification and opened the app. The transaction was pending with the status, awaiting confirmation. The recipient was a private individual. The name wasn't displayed in the interface, only an account number. The device from which the transfer was initiated was not her phone. A foreign device, authorized in the system. Michael had added his device to their joint banking profile 3 months ago when he'd asked for access for convenience, to pay utility bills. She pressed cancel transaction. The system asked for confirmation. She confirmed. The status changed to transaction canceled. Catherine placed the phone on her desk, looked out the window at the May sky, and exhaled a short, almost inaudible breath. So, he had started. Exactly when he calculated she would be busy. 11:47 a.m., the middle of her workday, between the 4th and 5th of her 6 patients. He knew her schedule. Of course, he knew. She never hid her work routine. It had been the same for years. The 5th patient knocked on the door. Catherine put her phone in her pocket and said in a steady voice, "Come in." She conducted the session, wrote her notes, saw the patient out, and as soon as the door closed, she called the bank. The customer support line answered after 4 minutes. A bit of a wait, but tolerable. Catherine asked to be connected to the fraud department. Another 2 minutes. Then a calm, professional voice. "How can I help you? My name is Catherine Hayes. Today, at 11:47 a.m., a transaction to transfer $48,000 was initiated from our joint family account. I did not initiate this transaction. I canceled it through the app. I need to get confirmation of which device initiated the transaction and who the recipient is." A short pause, the sound of a keyboard. Dr. Hayes. The transaction was indeed initiated today at 11:47 a.m. from a device authorized in the system as a secondary device. The recipient is a private individual, a transfer by account number. You are one of the account holders. However, the transaction was initiated without your involvement. I need an official statement for this attempted transaction, indicating the time, device, and recipient's details. Is that possible? Yes. You can request a statement at a branch or through your online portal. I also recommend you visit a branch in person. If you believe the transaction was unauthorized, we can place a restriction on remote transactions for the account. I will come in today after 6 p.m. Please log my call and the fact that I canceled the transaction. It's been logged. Thank you for calling. Catherine put the phone away and wrote in her notes app. Transfer attempt, initiated from Michael's device. Canceled by me. Call to bank logged. Request statement in person today. The 6th patient was waiting in the hall. She opened the door and smiled. Warmly, professionally, without a single crack in her composure. The text message arrived at 1:10 p.m. while she was on her lunch break. Or rather, while she was pretending to have lunch, sitting in the staff room with a bowl of soup that was growing cold, untouched, while she stared at her phone. The message was from an unknown number, short and official. Your application for a consumer loan of $75,000 has been received and is under review. A decision will be made within 24 hours. Catherine read it twice. Then again, slowly, word by word. $75,000. A consumer loan. In her name. She hadn't applied for any loan, not today, not yesterday, not last week. The last time she'd taken out a loan was 7 years ago, for a home renovation, and she had paid it off early. She opened the app for checking her credit history. She logged in and requested an up-to-date report. The system took a minute to process the request, which felt like an eternity. Then it produced the result. This morning at 8:53 a.m. before her first patient, before she had even entered her office, an inquiry had been made into her credit history. The request came from a microfinance company. Catherine scrolled further. Another inquiry from a different bank at 10:41 a.m., and one more from a third organization at 12:08 p.m. 3 inquiries in one morning. 3 organizations that had checked her credit history with the intent of issuing a loan. She hadn't submitted a single application. Catherine put down her spoon. The soup remained untouched. She stared at the wall opposite her. A chain of events formed in her mind, clear and stark as a bone on an X-ray. The transfer from her account was initiated in the morning, while she was at work. The loan applications were submitted in her name in the morning, while she was at work, when she gets to work today. That's exactly what he had said. The entire plan was calculated around her working hours. He knew that during work, she didn't look at her phone for long periods, didn't react to notifications instantly, and couldn't abandon a patient to check her bank account. He had calculated everything correctly. Almost everything. He just hadn't calculated one thing, that she would return for her keys. Catherine took 3 screenshots. The text about the loan application, the report from the credit bureau with the 3 inquiries, and the timestamps. She emailed them all to herself. Then she opened her notes and added a new section. Text about loan application I didn't submit. 3 credit history inquiries this morning. Screenshots taken, sent to email. Connection to the morning's transfer attempt is obvious. Doctor. Vance peeked into the staff room, tall, dark-haired, in her signature burgundy blazer. She was 5 years older than Catherine and 20 years more experienced in administrative intrigues of any scale. Patricia knew how to read people. It was her primary professional tool. Now she looked at the untouched bowl, then at Catherine's face, and asked without preamble, "Is something wrong?" Catherine paused for a second. Then she said quietly, steadily, "Patricia, I might need something. Official confirmation that today, from 9 a.m. until the end of the workday, I was here at the clinic, conducting appointments according to my schedule. It's important." Patricia didn't ask why. She just gave a short nod, like someone who understood the main point without needing extra words. "The schedule is with me. The visitor log is with the administrator. If you need my personal signature on a confirmation, just say the word. I'll sign it. Thank you. Eat your soup," Patricia added, already leaving. "It's cold, but still." Catherine looked at the bowl, picked up her spoon, and took one mechanical sip, just to give her body something other than adrenaline. 3.5 hours remained of her workday. During that time, she conducted 2 more sessions, her 6th patient, and an unscheduled consultation that Patricia had asked her to take at the last minute. Catherine took it. She worked as always precisely, attentively, without the slightest hint that in her pocket lay a phone with evidence of how her own husband was dismantling their shared life, piece by piece. At exactly 4:45 p.m., after seeing her last patient out, she closed her office, walked into the hallway, and stopped by the window. The same sky, the same parking lot, the same May trees. She took out her phone, opened her notes, and reread everything from the beginning. The logic was simple and ruthless. If she hadn't returned for the keys, she wouldn't have heard the whisper. If she hadn't canceled the transfer quickly, the money would have been gone by evening. If the loan had been approved, by nightfall she would have been saddled with a $75,000 debt she hadn't taken on. Catherine put her phone away, grabbed her bag, and spoke to Patricia Vance, who was lingering in the hallway with some documents, calmly and clearly. "Patricia, I need to get that statement about my workday from you, an official one, with the clinic's seal. Right now, if possible." Patricia looked at her attentively. For a second, no longer. "Let's go to my office," she said. The statement was prepared in 10 minutes. Arrival time 8:53 a.m. according to the log. Departure time, actual, 6 patients according to schedule, plus 1 consultation. Doctor. Vance's signature, the clinic's official seal. Catherine folded the paper into her folder, thanked her, and walked outside. In her car, she didn't start the engine right away. She sat in silence for a minute, looking at her hands on the steering wheel. Michael thought she was predictable, that her workday was a wall behind which he could do anything he wanted, that she would come home in the evening to find an empty account, a mountain of someone else's debts in her name, and her only option would be to deal with the consequences. He didn't know that she was already dealing with it. Not with the consequences, but with the cause. Catherine started the engine. Next stop, a lawyer. Everything else could wait. The law office of James Caldwell was located in an old building downtown, on the 2nd floor, behind a heavy wooden door with a brass plaque. No trendy glass, no reception desks with smiling young women. Just a door, a plaque, and a man inside who was paid for results, not interior design. Catherine had found Caldwell 3 years ago through a colleague whose sister had won a complex property dispute with his help. Back then, she had needed him to handle a deed of gift for a share in her mother's apartment. The case was simple, but Caldwell had handled it as if something significant were at stake. That was what she had liked about him. Now, significantly more was at stake. She had called him from her car, right from the clinic's parking lot. Caldwell answered after the second ring. His voice was dry, businesslike, without unnecessary pleasantries. Caldwell. Mr. Caldwell. This is Catherine Hayes. I need to see you today. Urgently. It's about unauthorized financial transactions and, likely, fraud. A second's pause. Can you be here at 6:30? Yes, I'll be there. She arrived at 6:25, went up to the second floor, and knocked. Caldwell opened the door himself, tall, lean, 44 years old, with short, graying hair. A face devoid of excess emotion, his gaze attentive and unhurried. He gestured to a chair in front of his desk, sat opposite her, opened a notepad, and placed a pen beside it. Tell me everything. From the beginning, Catherine told him. In order, without emotion, with precise timestamps. When she finished, he looked at his notepad for a few seconds, then raised his gaze. You have the phone with the notes with you? Yes. The screenshots of the bank notifications, the credit report. Everything is saved, sent to my email. Screenshots on the phone, copies in the cloud. Caldwell gave a slight, approving nod, without a smile. Good. Now, to the point. He set his pen aside and began to speak, clearly and without embellishment. The attempted transfer from the account, initiated from another device without your knowledge, is grounds for filing a report with the bank about an unauthorized transaction. You've already taken the first step by canceling it and calling them. Now you need to go to a branch in person, write a formal statement about the compromised remote access, and demand a printout with the details of the device, time, and recipient. The bank is obligated to provide this as part of your rights as an account holder. As for the loan applications, it's more complicated, but manageable. If loan applications were submitted in your name without your involvement, this falls under statutes related to unauthorized computer access and identity theft. And with the intent to defraud, it's wire fraud, plain and simple. The key question is how your data ended up with whoever submitted the applications. Catherine paused for a second, then she said what had already come together in her mind over the course of the day. 3 months ago, Michael asked me for the password to our joint banking portal. He said it was for convenience, to pay bills and subscriptions himself. I gave it to him. Around the same time, on 2 or 3 occasions, he asked me to show him the SMS codes. He said he was checking the 2-factor authentication settings on the joint account. I showed him not all of them, but a few times. Caldwell listened without changing his expression, only narrowing his eyes slightly. Do you remember the exact dates? No, but I can check my phone's text message history for the last 3 months. The codes with timestamps should be there. You need to do that first thing. Caldwell made a note. If the codes came to your number and you provided them voluntarily, it complicates things, but it doesn't close the case. Voluntary disclosure under false pretenses is qualified differently than unauthorized access. What matters is his intent to deceive. And judging by what you're describing, that intent was planned in advance and executed methodically. Catherine listened, thinking concurrently. 3 months. SMS codes, the portal password. This wasn't an impulse, it was preparation. He had built access to her data gradually, one step at a time, never asking for too much at once, so as not to raise suspicion. She had given it out of trust, out of the habit of thinking that a husband and wife were in the same boat. He had taken it and used it as a set of tools. Mr. Caldwell, she said, I want to understand the whole picture, not just the financial side. This morning, he was on the phone talking about how he did everything. Not just about a transfer, but something broader. We've planned, which means there's someone else. That's a logical conclusion, Caldwell agreed. A person rarely constructs a scheme like this in a vacuum. Someone is helping, or someone is waiting for the result at the other end. I need to know where the money was going, and if he has tickets. Caldwell looked up from his notepad. Tickets? I suspect he plans to leave, to disappear, leaving me with debts and an empty account. A pause. Caldwell looked at her for a few seconds, attentively, appraisingly. Do you have access to a shared computer or a shared email account? There's a laptop we both use. A shared user account on it. I haven't touched anything today. Go home. If there are open tabs, messages, or bookings on the shared device, look at them. You're not breaking any laws. It's a shared device with a shared account to which you have legal access. Don't go digging intentionally. Just document what's already open. Screenshots. Note the time and send them to me immediately. Catherine nodded. Regarding the loan applications, Caldwell continued, tonight, write to each organization that sent a notification or made an inquiry, stating that you are withdrawing the application and that it was submitted without your knowledge. This creates an official record of your dissent dated before any approval. If a loan is approved and dispersed, you will have grounds to dispute the contract. And the police? Tomorrow morning, together, I will prepare a statement tonight regarding the attempted fraud and unauthorized use of your personal data. Bring everything with you. Printouts of the notifications, the statement from your boss, the bank statement, the credit report. The tighter the timeline, the less room he has to manipulate the story. Catherine stood and extended her hand. They exchanged a brief, business-like handshake. Mr. Caldwell, I want you to understand. This isn't just about the money for me. We have a daughter, 13 years old. If he disappears with the money and debts, I'm left alone with all of this. And with her, Caldwell looked at her calmly. I understand. That's precisely why we're acting quickly and officially. Not a single step outside the law. It's the only strategy that works in your situation. She nodded and left. Outside, it was already getting dark. A warm May evening. The air, after a workday, was a bit thicker, smelling of heated asphalt and blooming trees. Catherine walked to her car, got in, and closed the door. She sat quietly for a few seconds, then took out her phone and texted Chloe. Running late. We'll be home in an hour. Have dinner without me. There's soup in the fridge. The reply came quickly. Just okay. Minimum words, no questions. Chloe had long since learned not to ask unnecessary ones. Catherine put her phone away and drove. She got home a little after 7. Michael wasn't there. His car wasn't in the lot. The entryway was quiet. His jacket was missing from the coat rack. Chloe was in her room. Quiet music could be heard from behind the door. Catherine went to the kitchen, made sure her daughter had eaten, rinsed her teacup, and walked into the living room, where their shared laptop sat on the coffee table. She opened the lid. The device wasn't locked. Michael never put a password on the shared laptop, saying it was inconvenient. The browser opened on its own, with the tabs from the last session still there. Catherine looked at the screen. 4 open tabs. The first, a flight aggregator, a search results page. A flight from their city to Istanbul. Departure date, the day after tomorrow, Thursday. An evening flight, 6:50 p.m., 2 passengers. Catherine took a picture of the screen. The second tab, a hotel booking, Istanbul, 4 nights, 2 guests, check-in on Thursday. Booking status, confirmed, reserved under Michael Hayes. The third tab, a web-based messenger. The chat was partially hidden. The screen had gone to sleep on this tab before the others, but a notification on the icon showed a name, Victoria M., and the last visible message in the preview line. I'm ready. Just tell me when. The fourth tab, an online article, How to Transfer Money Abroad to a Private Individual, Methods and Limitations. Catherine photographed each tab methodically, one by one. Then she opened the email client, the one configured in the browser as the shared family account. The one where utility bills, documents, and insurance policies came. In the Sent folder, over the last 3 weeks, she found 2 emails to an unknown address, with no subject line, containing attachments. She opened the first. A scan of her passport. She opened the second. A scan of her Social Security card and a copy of her proof of income statement, the one she herself had prepared 6 months ago for the bank during a routine review. She photographed both emails, the sending dates, the recipient's address. Then she closed the laptop and stared at the closed lid for a few seconds. Passport, Social Security card, proof of income, the exact set of documents needed to apply for a loan in someone else's name. The exact set that had ended up with someone on the other end of that chat 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks before this morning, when at 8:53 a.m., the first inquiry into her credit history was made. The scheme was complete. Michael had gathered the documents in advance, passed them on, probably to that same Victoria M., who was ready and just waiting for the signal. The loan applications were submitted using her data through third parties or online services. The money from the joint account was supposed to be transferred today. The tickets were bought for the day after tomorrow. He planned to leave on Thursday, leaving her with an empty account, someone else's debts, and scans of her documents already circulating among unknown organizations. Catherine opened her phone and wrote to Caldwell. Found on the shared laptop. Open tabs. Photographed everything. The reply came in 4 minutes. Excellent. Don't touch anything on the laptop. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., the police. I'll be there. I'll prepare a request to identify the recipient of the emails. For the tickets and hotel, we can organize a check through the detective. Do not speak to your husband about what you know. Catherine read it, wrote back a short understood, and put her phone away. Chloe came out of her room, in her pajamas, phone in hand. She stopped in the living room doorway and looked at her mother. 13 is an age when a person can already read adults better than they think. Mom, is everything okay? Catherine looked at her daughter, at this person who was the most important thing at stake today. Yes, she said steadily, just a little tired. Go to bed. Chloe was silent for a second, then nodded and left. Catherine heard her bedroom door close. Then, silence. She returned to the table, opened her folder of documents, and laid out the printouts, the statement from Patricia, and the sheet with her notes. She looked at it all calmly, without panic, the way a surgeon looks at a chart before an operation. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., the police. Tonight, emails to the credit organizations withdrawing the applications. Then the bank. The official statement, restricting remote transactions. Tickets to Istanbul for the day after tomorrow. That meant tomorrow was the last day, when everything could still be stopped before he disappeared. Catherine took a pen and wrote one phrase on a clean sheet of paper. He calculated everything except one thing. And below it, a second. Me. She closed the folder. The night was ahead. She needed to get some sleep. Wednesday began at 6 a.m., 45 minutes earlier than usual. Catherine didn't wait for the alarm. She woke up on her own, lying in the dark for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling and listening to the silence of the apartment. Michael had come home late. She heard him open the door around 11, heard him go to the kitchen, heard him go to bed. She didn't get up. She lay with her eyes closed and her breathing even, the way a person who has made a decision can lie, simply waiting for morning. Michael was sleeping in the bedroom. She had moved to the sofa in the living room a month ago, an unspoken change, without explanation, as happens in families where gestures have long replaced words. He hadn't asked. She hadn't explained. It became another thing that each understood in their own way. At 6:05, Catherine got up. Shower. Coffee. Today, specifically coffee strong, black. She dressed quickly. Dark gray slacks, a white blouse, a jacket. She opened the folder with the documents, checked the contents. Printouts of the notifications, credit bureau reports, screenshots from the laptop, the statement from Patricia Vance, her notes with timestamps, and the written withdrawals of the loan applications. She had emailed those last night to each of the 3 organizations, documenting the time they were sent. At 8:15, Michael appeared in the living room doorway. He was in pajama pants and a t-shirt, a glass of water in his hand, the look of someone who had just woken up and wasn't fully engaged yet. But his eyes were immediately alert. Catherine noticed it. No matter how he looked on the outside, his eyes had switched on before his body. "You're up early," he said. His voice was soft, neutral. "Meeting before work," she answered, just as neutrally. It wasn't a lie. There was indeed a meeting. He looked at the folder in her hands for a second longer than he should have. Then his gaze shifted to her face. "Everything okay?" "Yes. Are you having breakfast?" "Probably." Chloe gets up at 8. Remind her about her test. She said it calmly, as usual, and walked out of the living room into the entryway. She put on her coat, took her bag, and opened the door. "Kate." She turned around. Michael was standing in the living room doorway, tall, calm on the surface, with his glass of water, looking at her. Something in his gaze was tense, not anxiety, but calculation, like someone trying to figure out if the other person knows something they shouldn't. "What time will you be home tonight?" "The usual," she said and closed the door. In the elevator, she exhaled. 3 seconds down, another 20 seconds, and she would be in the courtyard, in her car with the doors locked and the engine on. Caldwell was waiting for her at the entrance to the police station at exactly 9 a.m. A dark blazer, a folder under his arm. No unnecessary words upon meeting, just a nod and a gesture. Let's go. The desk sergeant saw them without a wait when Caldwell stated the purpose of their visit. They were escorted to the office of a detective in the Economic Crimes Unit. Detective Mark Riley, 42, large, seemingly slow-moving, but with that specific focus in his eyes common to people accustomed to seeing schemes behind words. He gestured for them to sit, opened a clean form, and looked at Caldwell. "I'm listening." Caldwell spoke clearly, without digressions. Facts, timeline, documents. Catherine laid out the papers as the lawyer named them. Riley didn't interrupt, only occasionally asking a short, pointed question. The device from which the transfer was initiated was authorized in the banking system, with your consent? I gave him access to the portal, Catherine answered. But initiating a large transfer without my confirmation is not what I consented to. You provided the SMS codes voluntarily, under false pretenses. He told me it was to configure the joint account. The documents, passport, social security card, he had copies, not the originals? Correct. But as the emails from the shared account show, he sent scans to a third-party address 3 weeks ago. Riley made a note. The tickets are for the day after tomorrow. 2 passengers. Has the second one been identified? Not at this stage, Caldwell replied. That's one of the requests we're asking to be included in the scope of the investigation. Riley nodded, continued writing, then looked up directly at Catherine, not through her lawyer. Dr. Hayes, let me explain something you need to understand. What you're describing is a classic scheme. Remote access to a bank account is established gradually, through domestic trust. Then a transaction is initiated during the victim's working hours when their reaction time is slower. Simultaneously, loans are taken out in the victim's name. The calculation is simple. By the time the person discovers what has happened, the money is gone, the debts exist, and the person who did it has either left the country or claims she did it all herself. The codes came to her phone. She gave them away. That's why your actions today are correct. You created a timeline before he had a chance to build his own version. Could he try to create it now? Catherine asked. He could. That's why the faster we begin an official investigation, the less time he has. The statement took 40 minutes to complete. Catherine signed it. Riley accepted the package of documents and gave her a receipt for her report. We'll begin the investigation today into the attempted unauthorized transfer and the submission of loan applications using another person's data. We'll send an official request to the bank. As for the tickets, we'll contact Transportation Security. Caldwell shook his hand. Catherine did as well. On their way out of the station, the lawyer said, "Now, the bank. While Riley gets the official procedure started, you need to personally shut down the remote access." The bank branch was a 7-minute drive away. Catherine knew it well. The white facade, the revolving door, the open-plan office with low partitions. At the counter, she asked for someone from the security department. She was asked to wait. It didn't take long. 3 minutes. Kevin Miller turned out to be a man in his mid-30s, solidly built, with a neat, short beard and a habit of looking directly at people, without fidgeting. He listened to Catherine in silence, then opened his system. The transaction yesterday at 11:47 a.m. I see it. Cancelled by the owner via the app at 11:51 a.m. He paused. The device from which the transaction was initiated was added to the profile 7 weeks ago. Authorization was completed through the standard procedure. The confirmation code was sent to your number. I did not consciously provide the code to add a device, Catherine said steadily. It was explained to me as a routine settings check. Miller looked at her attentively, not with skepticism, but with professional focus. Then he said, "Understood. We'll need your written statement about the compromised remote access. After that, we will block the secondary device, reset all active sessions, and place a temporary ban on large remote transactions. We will prepare an official statement on yesterday's attempted transfer with the recipient's details. Detective Riley from the Economic Crimes Unit will be sending you an official request within the day," Caldwell added. Miller nodded. In that case, I will mark this case as suspicious right now and forward it to our internal monitoring service. Catherine wrote the statement by hand, neatly, without any corrections. She laid out the facts: the date the secondary device was authorized, the circumstances under which the code was provided, the fact of the unauthorized transfer initiation, the time of cancellation. She signed it. Received a reference number. Miller walked them to the department door and said, just as they were leaving, the statement with the recipient's details will be ready by the end of the day. You can pick it up in person or receive it via the detective's official request. You did the right thing by coming in immediately. Catherine nodded. They walked out into the main banking hall. Caldwell checked the time. 11:30. Will you make it to work? My first patient is at 1 p.m. I'll make it. Good. He opened his folder and made some notes. While we were in there, Riley has already started the investigation. By this evening, we should have a picture of the tickets and the transfer recipient. If the flight is the day after tomorrow, we have today and tomorrow. That should be enough. It has to be, provided he doesn't change his plans sooner. She thought for a second. He won't change them. He's sure I don't know anything. Caldwell gave her a short look, with that professional calm that, in good lawyers, signifies reliability, not indifference. Then we have the advantage. At 12:30, Catherine was walking into the clinic. Patricia Vance met her in the hallway. She looked at her face, then at the clock. You made it, Patricia said. Your 1 o'clock is already in the waiting room. I'm on my way. Catherine took off her coat. Patricia, that statement you signed for me yesterday, it might be needed officially. For a detective. Patricia Vance was a woman who didn't ask unnecessary questions or make unnecessary movements. It was this quality that had helped her run the clinic for 9 years. If you need a second copy with the seal, just say so. I'll make it. Thank you. The day proceeded in its usual rhythm. Patients, notes, sessions. At 2:40 p.m., her phone vibrated. A call from Michael. Catherine stared at the screen for a few seconds, then pressed accept. Hello? His voice was soft, almost domestic. Hey, I was just thinking, we haven't gone anywhere in a while. Maybe we could take a trip this weekend? With Chloe? The pause was exactly as long as she could afford. A second, no more. We'll see how the schedule looks. Well, I just mean, I'd like to have a proper talk. Tonight? Okay, we'll talk tonight. She ended the call, placed the phone on her desk, and looked at it for a few seconds. There it was, the gentle probing, just as Riley had warned. We haven't gone anywhere in a while. 40 hours before a flight to Istanbul. I'd like to have a proper talk. From the man who had sent scans of her passport to a stranger 3 weeks ago. She opened her notes. Wrote, attempt to create the appearance of a normal relationship. Said he wants to talk properly tonight. Noted, saved. At 4:15 p.m., a message came from Caldwell. Riley has identified the second passenger on the tickets. Victoria Morgan, 30 years old, formerly an accountant. The recipient of yesterday's transfer is an account registered to the same person. The loan applications were submitted through an online service using your documents. The source of the documents is being established. Tomorrow is the key point. Riley will coordinate with transportation security. The flight is at 6:50 p.m. You need to be at the airport by 6 p.m. Catherine reread it twice. Victoria Morgan, 30 years old, an accountant. The same Victoria M. from the chat who had written, I'm ready, just tell me when. The ticket was bought. The hotel booked. The money had almost been sent. The documents handed over. Michael was confident everything was going according to plan. Tomorrow at 6:50 p.m. was the flight to Istanbul. Tomorrow at 6 p.m., she would be at the airport. Catherine put her phone away. She saw her last patient, closed her office, and was getting dressed when she ran into Patricia in the hallway. Her boss was walking toward her with a stack of documents. Leaving? Yes. Patricia looked at her attentively, the way a person who has understood something but won't say it out loud looks. According to the schedule, you're not here at the end of the day tomorrow. Catherine paused for a second. I might have to leave a little early. Personal matter. All right. Patricia nodded. If you need another statement, I'm here until 7. Catherine walked outside. A warm May evening. The scent of blooming trees lingered along the avenue. She got to her car, opened the door, sat down, took out her phone, and wrote one word to Caldwell: "I'll be there." She put the phone away, started the engine, and drove home, to where Michael was probably already preparing dinner and rehearsing his lines for their proper talk. She wasn't afraid of that conversation. She simply wasn't going to have it, because tomorrow evening, everything would be decided. Thursday began with silence. Catherine woke at 6:30 a.m., on her own, without an alarm, like someone with a long-established internal mechanism, independent of fatigue or external circumstances. She lay for a few minutes on the sofa in the living room, listening to the apartment. Behind the wall, the bedroom was silent. Chloe's room, too. An early May morning, a thin strip of pale sky was visible in the gap between the curtains. Last night, Michael had talked to her over dinner. Evenly, quietly, almost domestically. He told her something about work, asked about their daughter's test, suggested a trip to the farmer's market on Saturday. Catherine answered briefly, without coldness but also without warmth, just enough not to arouse suspicion. It required effort. Not because she couldn't maintain her composure, she could. Years of medical practice had taught her that, but because sitting across from a person who had sent scans of your passport to a stranger and bought plane tickets for the day after tomorrow, while suggesting a trip to the market on Saturday, requires a special kind of internal effort that has no name but consumes energy. She didn't break. She cleared the dishes, said a calm goodnight, and went to bed. Now, it was the morning of the last day of his plan. Catherine got up. Shower, coffee. She dressed deliberately today, choosing a gray blazer and dark slacks severe, without frills, because she was accustomed to dressing for the task ahead. And much lay ahead today. At 7:30, Chloe came into the kitchen, in her school uniform, backpack on, looking sleepy. She poured herself tea, took the cheese sandwich her mother had already made, and covered with a plate. She looked at Catherine with that particular teenage gaze that says both, "I notice everything, and I'm not going to ask." "Will you be late tonight?" she asked. "Possibly, yes. Eat dinner on your own. I'll leave something in the fridge." Chloe nodded. Then, already in the doorway, she stopped and said quietly, without turning around, "Mom, are you okay?" Catherine looked at her daughter's back. At that thin silhouette in the doorway, the backpack with a little bear keychain, the last childish accessory Chloe hadn't yet discarded, though she could have long ago. "Yes," she said. "Everything's fine. Go on. You'll be late." Chloe left. Catherine washed the cup, gathered her folder of documents, and checked her phone. No messages from Caldwell, which meant the plan hadn't changed. Flight at 6:50 p.m. She had to be at the airport by 6 p.m. Until then, a normal workday. 6 patients, a standard schedule. Michael came out of the bedroom at 8:15, already dressed in a shirt and slacks, carrying a bag. Catherine noticed the bag was fuller than usual. Not a travel bag, no, his work bag, but stuffed. He placed it by the door in the entryway, went to the kitchen, and poured himself some coffee. "I'll be late from work today," he said, not turning around. "Client meeting. Could go until 8. "Okay," Catherine replied. He turned and looked at her. His gaze lingered for a second, no more. It was searching for something, anxiety, suspicion, any signal that she knew. He found nothing. "All right then," he said. "See you. Bye." The door closed. Catherine stood in the kitchen and listened as he pressed the elevator button, as the elevator doors opened and closed, as the hum of the mechanism faded. She opened her phone and wrote one word to Caldwell: "He's left." The reply was instantaneous. "Riley has been alerted. Proceed with your day. Leave at 5:30. The workday passed in the same steady tempo as the previous two. Patients, notes, sessions. Catherine worked precisely and attentively, perhaps even more attentively than usual, because when a person is holding something very important inside, their hands and voice become more careful, as if the body is compensating for internal tension with external precision. At 1:40 p.m., a message came from Caldwell. "Riley confirms. Both tickets are active. Check-in for the flight opens at 4 p.m. Airport transportation security has been notified. We proceed as planned." At 3:10 p.m., another one. "Bank confirms. The recipient details for yesterday's transfer match the account of Victoria Morgan, officially documented. Riley has enough for a detention and questioning. Catherine read it, put her phone away, and saw her last afternoon patient. At 5:25 p.m., she went to Patricia Vance's office. Her boss was sitting at her desk with papers and looked up. "I'm leaving a little early," Catherine said. "Personal matter." Patricia looked at her attentively, the same way she had been looking these past few days, understanding far more than she was being told. "Go," she said, simply, "and hold on." Catherine left the clinic at 5:30 p.m. Caldwell was already waiting by his car, a dark gray sedan, parked 2 spots down from hers. They exchanged a brief glance. He nodded toward his car. "We'll ride together. It's easier." The airport was a 22-minute drive from the clinic in evening traffic. They made it in 25, held up at one traffic light. Caldwell drove in silence. Catherine sat in the passenger seat, folder on her lap, and watched the road. There was nothing to say. Everything had been said, everything decided. All that was left was to arrive. The airport greeted them with its familiar hum. Check-in counters, flight information displays, the smell of coffee from a cafe near the entrance, the voice of an announcer calling for boarding. Detective Riley was waiting for them by the information desk, in civilian clothes, no uniform. 2 uniformed transport police officers stood with him. He gave Caldwell a brief handshake and nodded to Catherine. "Check-in opened 20 minutes ago," he said quietly. "According to the system, 1 passenger has already checked in online. The second one hasn't yet. We'll wait by the document check counter." "Will he come alone?" Caldwell asked. "Unknown. They may have arranged to meet here." Riley looked at Catherine. "Are you ready?" "Yes. Your job is just to be here. The official part is on me and the transport police. You don't engage in conversation first, unless I tell you to." Catherine nodded. They took up a position slightly to the side of the main flow of people, where they could see the check-in counter for the flight and the passport control area without being conspicuous. Caldwell stood next to Catherine. Riley was slightly ahead with his officers. Michael appeared at 5:52 p.m. Catherine saw him immediately tall, in a dark jacket, with a duffel bag over his shoulder. A travel bag, not his work one, but the one that was kept on the top shelf of the storage closet. She recognized the bag before his face. He walked confidently, without hurry, with the air of a man for whom everything is calculated and under control. There was no one with him. He approached the check-in counter, took out his passport, and said something to the agent. She looked at her screen, then back at him. A second longer than usual. She typed something, then looked again. At that moment, the 2 transport police officers approached the counter. Catherine saw Michael turn his head, saw his gaze slide over the uniforms, saw something in his face change for a split second. Not fear, but a recalculation, swift and internal, like someone instantly checking if they'd made a mistake somewhere in their calculations. One of the officers said something quietly, calmly. Michael replied. The officer said something else. Michael replied again, this time with a different, slightly more tense intonation. Riley moved forward. Catherine and Caldwell stayed put. The detective approached the counter, showed his badge, and said a few words. Michael listened and, at that moment, turned his head to the side, just glancing around, and he saw Catherine. They looked at each other for about 3 seconds. Her face was calm, not triumphant, not angry, just calm. The face of a person who had come to the right place at the right time. In those 3 seconds, his face went through several states. Catherine saw everyone. First, confusion how? Then, shock she knows. Then, an attempt to compose himself. Riley said something to him. Michael tore his gaze away from Catherine and turned to the detective. This is some kind of misunderstanding, he said, loud enough for Catherine to hear. His voice was steady, almost confident. I'm going on a business trip. All my documents are in order. We'll check the documents, Riley replied calmly. Please come with us. I have the right to know on what grounds. On the grounds of a registered report concerning fraudulent activities. Please come with us, Mr. Hayes. This will only take a moment. A pause. Michael stood there for a second or two, then picked up his bag and started walking with the officers. As he passed Catherine, He stopped for half a step. No more. You've misunderstood everything, he said quietly. I can explain. Catherine looked at him, steadily, without a tremor. I heard you on Tuesday morning, she said, just as quietly, for his ears only. You were counting on me getting to work and not noticing anything, but I came back for my keys, and I noticed everything. He looked at her and found nothing to say. Let's go, the officer repeated. Michael walked forward. Caldwell came and stood next to Catherine. They watched in silence as Michael was led away toward a service corridor, the duffel bag over his shoulder, the dark jacket, his straight back, a man still maintaining his posture, even though he already understood everything. At the door to the service corridor, a woman appeared short, in a light trench coat, with a small rolling suitcase. She stopped, saw what was happening, and something in her face changed instantly. She looked at Michael being led away for a second. No longer. Then she turned and walked quickly back toward the exit, without looking back. Catherine saw it. She noted it to herself without anger, with an almost professional indifference. There was the answer to what this woman meant to Michael, exactly as much as he was worth as a tool, no more. Caldwell said, Riley will be in there for about 40 minutes. Then he'll come out with the report. You'll need to sign a few documents. Okay. Do you want some coffee? There's a cafe here. Catherine thought for a second. She'd already had coffee today, at 6:30 a.m., standing alone in her kitchen. But now, perhaps, yes, she said. They sat at a small table by the window. Outside, the tarmac, the tails of airplanes, the lights of the runways beginning to glow in the gathering dusk. Caldwell got 2 coffees from the counter and placed one in front of Catherine. The bank will unfreeze the account. It will be under your full control as soon as they receive the police report, Caldwell said. As for the loan applications, given your timely withdrawal and the official documentation of fraudulent activity, the contracts will be disputed. It will take time, but you have a strong case. Regarding your daughter, child support obligations in a divorce are determined by the court. With a criminal case pending, you have additional grounds to request travel restrictions until the court decides. He's not going anywhere until this case is closed. Catherine nodded and took a sip of coffee. Riley appeared after 35 minutes. He came out of the service corridor, walked over to their table, and sat down. He placed a few sheets of paper in front of Catherine, detained for document verification and to give a statement regarding the report. His phone contains messages confirming coordinated actions. The ticket was purchased jointly with Victoria Morgan. The recipient of yesterday's transfer was her as well. Scans of your documents were found on his phone in a folder within the chat history. Riley looked at Catherine. He tried to explain the transfer as shared family savings and insisted you knew about it. But your course of action, the call to the bank, the police report, the official loan withdrawals, the statement from your workplace completely refutes that version. You acted before he had time to build his narrative. What's next? Caldwell asked. An investigation under wire fraud statutes. Based on the results, a decision on whether to press criminal charges. The amount of evidence is substantial. Riley looked at Catherine. You did everything right, from the very beginning. She signed the documents, thanked him, and stood up. Caldwell walked her to her car. In the parking lot, just before she got in, he said, The divorce petition tomorrow, if you're ready. I can help with the wording. I'm ready, Catherine said, without a pause. He nodded. All right, Dr. Hayes. She drove home alone. The May evening outside the window, a dark blue sky, city lights, the smell of warm asphalt seeping through the slightly open window. The airport was behind her. The apartment was quiet. Chloe was sitting in the living room with a textbook. She saw her mother and said, Did you eat? No, not yet. I'll heat up dinner. Catherine took off her coat and hung it up. She walked into the living room, sank onto the sofa, and closed her eyes for a few seconds. Behind her were 3 days. The whisper in the entryway, the notifications, the bank, the police, the documents, the airport. Ahead of her was a divorce, a court case, and a conversation with her daughter that wouldn't be simple but would be honest. A lot of work, long and real. But today's work was done. From the kitchen came the smell of dinner warming up and the sound of Chloe taking out plates. A familiar, domestic, and utterly real sound. Catherine opened her eyes. One door was closed, another was open, and this time she had the keys.